Hi everyone. In this video, I will explain the XPath. What's XPath, type of the XPath, and XPath also has some functions. So this is actually the content that I'm going to cover in this video. So let's first start with the introduction. What is XPath? XPath stands for XML path. It's a query language that is used to navigate through the XML document. You can use the XPath to navigate through the HTML page. You can use it to identify the web elements so that they can perform the action. XPath is one of the 8 locators of the Selenium. Basically, it works the same way, but it has a different structures. So XPath, there are two types of XPath: absolute XPath and relative XPath. Absolute XPath it starts from the root node. Absolute XPath starts with a 1// and it starts from the root node. Absolute XPath is the most we can say that the simplest form of the XPath, but absolute XPath has a major disadvantage or downside, and the downside is that if there is any change in the path of the element, then the element won't work, the locators won't work. So let me actually show you how we can identify a web element using the XPath. All right, so let's say that we want to locate this username, right? So I right click, go, then click and inspect. Then what I do, so let's say I want to identify this username field. I click on it. All the properties are highlighted, right? So then I right click on that and then go to copy. And all the way down, we have copy full XPath. Full XPath is the same as a absolute XPath. So I copy this and then I hit Control F or Command F. This field opens and then you paste it. So when you paste it, now we identify this element by using absolute XPath. But as I already said, so what we can learn from this, we can say that we can see that the absolute XPath starts with a single /. It means that it starts from the root node, right? So if you go all the way, we can see that the root node is HTML and it starts from the root node. And this is pretty long. Absolute XPath is pretty long. And if there is any changes in any of this, then this web element won't work. So this major downside renders absolute XPath as useless. And absolute XPath is not used in automation because it is not stable. It's not effective. Then we move to the next type. Next type is relative XPath. So relative XPath is the one that we use with the XPath. When it comes to the XPath, we always use the relative XPath. We don't use the absolute XPath. So relative XPath starts with the 2//. 2// meaning that it kind of starts anywhere on your page. And 2// shows the current node, or you can identify a web element anywhere on your page. It doesn't start from the root node. It can start anywhere on your page. So the most simple form of the relative XPath is this. What we use, as I already said, the relative XPath starts with a 2//. Then we use a tag name like info, div, tag A, etc. We use the bracket, @, attribute, and value of the attribute. Also keep in mind that the value of the attribute is enclosed in a single quotation. All right, so let's actually use this basic form to identify one web element from the page. So let's say that I want to identify this button, right? So I click on this button and I have the ID right here, right? So I copy the value of the ID, the value of the attribute ID, And then what I do, as I said, what is the basic form? Usually starts with a /, then we use a tag name. So the tag name for this is input, right? So we use a tag name input, then we have the bracket @ ID and value of the ID. And then we close that with a bracket. So right now we actually identify this by using the relative expat. So this was about the basic form. This is basically the syntax for the relative expat. You can always follow that. And these are the explanation that I already explained these. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. So next slide, also the first thing is the basic form of the expat. Now we have contain. So what is contain? Contain is a function. So expat supports some function like contains, like it starts with, like text that we will cover later on. But for now, we focus on the contains. So how we can use contain to identify the web element, right? So let's start. Let's say that I want to identify this username by using contain. So there are a lot of properties. Let's say that I want to identify this by ID. So I copy this. What is the basic format for the contain? This is, you have to follow this in order to use the contain. What we do, we use a // tag name contains. Contain is a method, as I said. It has the parentheses. Then inside the parentheses, you use the @ attribute and value of the attribute. So let's actually find that one element by using the contain. So I'm going to use // input. Then what we say, contains, right? And parentheses. Then inside the parentheses, I use ID, and then I use the equal sign, the single quotation, and then at the end we need the what? We need the bracket. So why it doesn't work? It's because we don't need the we need to put a comma instead of the equal sign. So right now, you would I'm going to tell you in what cases you might use in what scenario you might use the contains, right? So let's say that I want to identify this username field, but the problem, let's assume that whenever you refresh the browser, this ID user stays the same, user part, but name keeps changing. For example, whenever you refresh, it becomes name 1, name 2, name 3. Then in that case, we have problem, right? So we have problem because this name changes. Now, with the contains, we can say that as long as the web element as contains the user, so it doesn't care about the name, we can identify it only by the user. So what we can say, we can actually delete this one. We can delete this one, and it only find that element based on the user. So you might, I'm pretty sure that in automation, you may come across that sometimes there are some elements that its value, some part of the values, like let's say this part, the user stays the same, always the same. It's called static, but the other part, like name, it keeps changing. So in that case, when it keeps changing, then you will run into problems. Of course, if you use the contains, you will not run into the problem because contains relies only on the user, not the name part. So then we can say that contain is used to identify the web element that's dynamically changes, that always changing. In this case, we use contain. So let's move on to the next slide. We see what we have in the next slide. We have the logical operator. Oh, excuse me. Logical operators, let's actually show that how we can use the logical operator to find the web element. Identify the web element. Let's say I want to identify this by using the logical operator, right? So I'm going to use the ID, right? ID. And what is the tag? The tag is input. Then I'm going to, so this is one. And I'm going to use the logical AND operator, and the next one that I'm going to use the name. Then I can say add name, and I paste the value, and then, so let me see what's going on over here. Input at, oh yeah, I forgot the ID. So ID, there you go. So what happens over here? We identify this element by using two attributes, ID and name. So how do we connect? How can we do that? We can do that with the help of and logical and operators. So the this web element will be identify if this both attribute matches. The value of the attribute, they must be matched. Then in that case, we can identify this element if both value matches, ID and name. If one of these changes, so let's say if one of these changes, in that case it doesn't work. So they both value must work. Then we have so here we use the logical AND operator, meaning that the both value must match. In the same way, we can actually use OR operator, right? OR operator. So OR operator it means that either ID or username matches. Both do not have to both value match. It works only as one value matches. So let's say that you want to send your username with the send key method of the Selenium, right? And you identify the web element by using the logical OR operator with the ID and username. Let's say later on, when you execute your test script, let's say that this value changes, right? This value changes, but this value doesn't. Then in that, it's going to work, because our condition is that as long as one of these, either this one or this one value stays the same, then it will work. All right, so let's move on from this. This is actually the basic syntax that you guys can follow. So let's move to the next one. The next one we have using text. Text function with the XPath is used whenever you have the visible text on the page. You can use that text to identify a web element. So let's say that we have a text over here, right? Then in that case, what you can do, you can click on this and then double click, you copy the text. Keep in mind that the tag name is your H4, right? H4. So what we use in relative XPath to /H4, then we use @. We don't use @ here because this is text, and then what we use, value of the text and bracket. So why this is not working? Because here with the text function, we need to use the equal sign, right? So now we identify this by using the text, All right, so let me show you another trick. It's basically you can use combine contains and also text in the same method within another method. So let's say that you want to identify this element not by the entire text, only, let's say, by this text, right? Only by this text. So I'm going to copy that. So how we can do that? You can use the contain method. Contain with a text function. We use what was the tag? It was H4, right? It was H4, and then we use contains. We use a text, and then we are going to use this partial text, parentheses, and then close the bracket. So if you see right here, we can actually identify this by using the contain and also text within the same. We can combine these two elements. So here the difference is that we identify this element only by parts of that text, not the entire text, right? So we can identify by the parts of that text. In this case, you can actually use contains with the text method to identify a web element. All right, so let's move on, see what the next on the slide. Next, we have starts with. It starts with is also one of the function, very useful function that you can use to identify a web element. So let's say that again, I want to identify this username, and by using the we want to identify this username field by using the what? By using the what was on the slide? By using the starts with. So if I want to identify this, let's say I want to identify this by the user by the ID attribute. I copy that. Of course, the input, the tag is input. So what I do here, input ID. Oh, sorry. It starts dash with. This is also a function. So we need the parentheses. What we need ID, and then value of the ID. So this is value of the ID, and we need our bracket. So there you go. Now, so what it means, why do we use a starts with, right? So let's say that here your text, this text is pretty short, right? This text is pretty short. But let's say that if this is a really super duper long text, then you don't have to put the entire text. You can say, as long as it starts with a user, then I'm good. I don't care about the rest of this. I care only about the user. So this is also, it starts with also use when your web element, the value of the attribute keeps changing, right? On some web pages, this value keep changing. Then in that case, you can extract a half part or partial of the text. You don't have to put the entire text. So right now I can delete this and I can rely only on the users. And this is the same as a scenario with a contain. So as I say that, let's say that this value, the name part is keep changing, right? This one keep changing whenever you refresh your page, but this user stays the same. Then you can extract this user, and you can say that as long as it starts with the word user, then I don't care about the rest of the value. And in that case, you can actually use the starts with function. All right. So I forgot the, let me actually show you that again. So here, because it doesn't show 1 of 1, it's supposed to show 1 of 1 because we forgot the bracket. Right now it shows 1 of 1. All right, so let's move to the next one. The next one on our list, we have the index. So what is index? Let me actually show you that as well. So let me get rid of that. So let's say that I want to identify this element, right? This element with a form group. What's the tag name is div, right? The tag name is div. We use for the relative XPath, we use a div and then the tag name, and what is the class and value of the class. So the value of the class and the bracket. So we identify this element, but you see the problem is say the 1 of 2. So there are 2 elements that they are the same, right? There are 2 elements that they are the same. If I hit enter key, it moves to the next one. When I press the enter key or return key on Mac, then it moves back and forth. So let's say that I want to stay right here. I don't want to move it. I want to be this unique. So I want to perform my action on this one, not on this one. In that case, what you can do, you can open bracket, then close bracket. Inside the bracket, you can specify which one you want to locate. Let's say this is number 1, the first one, and number 2 goes to the next one, right? So let's say that I want to stay on number 1. So index, when there are multiple elements, you can use the bracket and you can specify which element you want to move on, right? You want to navigate to. You can use the index. We're going to move from this. This is also the basic syntax. As you say, you see the bracket and use the index number. All right. Okay, so right now we come to the XPath access. So what are the XPath access or access methods? So these are basically used when the web elements are dynamic. They constantly keep changing. They are not static. Then in that case, you can actually use XPath access. because the elements keep changing. Let's say like a web table on the HTML page, right? Because there are you're adding rows, you're adding columns, so the value constantly keep adding and keep changing. Then in that case, you can use the expat axis. So if I move back, this is actually from this part below. These are all the expat axes. We first start with the following. So what are these following? How we can use the following? So let's say that I wanna identify this web element, right? So this web element, I click on the class value, and then the tag name is div, right? So let's say I want to go to div and then class, paste the value, and then this one. There you go. So we identify this one, right? Now we can say what web element follow, this element, right? What web element? For example, this one, form follow this, div follow this div, this input. There are a lot of elements that follow this web element. So in that case, the element that follow this one, you can navigate to them, you can move to them by using the following axis, method following. So let's say if I want to move from this div to this input, then in that case, what can I do here? I can use 2// and then I can use what? I can use following : this is the syntax, and then you can use what? Then you can use input. So there you go. Now we move from where? We move from here to here, right? To this input. How we could move, because these elements follow this element. Any element that follow this element, we can move to that by using the following. We use 2// following : and then the tag name. This is the syntax for that. In the same way, we have following-sibling. Following-sibling also is used to, we can identify the web elements that comes after the current node. For example, this is the current node, right? Let's say this is the current node. This web element comes after this, right? This web element comes after this. So we can identify these by using the following-sibling. So, but there is also another change. Following-sibling basically, as the siblings basically means peers, right? It refers to the two nodes that share the same parent. Exactly right here. For example, this one element, and this one element, they are the same level. If you see there is a line that say that they are the same level. They are the same level. So if I want to move from here to here, then I can use the following-sibling. They are the same level and they have the same parents. This div is the parents of this and also the parents of this one. So how we can move from, let's say, if you identify this one, we identify this one, I want to move from here to this input. Let me show you how you can do that. So we have div, then we have a class, and we paste the value. So this is the first one. We identify this, but as I said, this is 1 of 2. It's supposed to say 1 of 1 because right now it's not stable, right? There are 2 elements. So how we can stay in this element? As I said, you can use the index, right? You can use the index, open bracket, then number 1, close bracket. Now this is say 1 of 1. All right. So now if I if I want to move from this one to this one, which they are on the same level and they have the same parent div, you can use what? You can use, let me show you, following-sibling, then : and then use div. There you go. So now we move from here to here. Again, because there are two of them, how we can stay on this one? If you want to stay on this one, again, you can use the bracket and number 2. There you go. Now we stay on this one. All right. So this is it about the following sibling. As I say, following siblings are used to identify the web elements that comes after the current node. There's another condition that the following siblings, they share the same parent, right? And also they are the same level. All right, let's move on actually. Move on, the next one we have preceding. Okay, so preceding is kind of the same as following, but it's the opposite. It goes upward, right? Following goes downward, preceding goes upward. We can identify the web elements that comes before the current node, right? Whatever element comes before this, we can move to that preceding, right? So let's say that let me actually get rid of this. So let me see. Let's say that we have this we want to identify this username field, right? So I click on the ID, and then I what is that? Input ID and equal, and then there you go. So we identify this. With the preceding, whatever element that comes before this element, we can move to that by using the preceding. So let's say that if I want to move from this to this one, right? This is the preceding that comes before this one. How can I move from here to here? Then in that case, you can use preceding, right? 2// preceding : and then I can use div, right? So now I move from here to the div, right? I move from here to div. All right. So if I want to move from here to this div, then I can do that as well, I believe. I use preceding : div. All right. So I just remember that we cannot use the div 2 times. All right. So, but again, so how we can use the preceding. We can use the preceding to move to to identify the web element that comes before the current node, right? Before the current node. When it comes to the preceding, you can identify the web element that comes before the current node. All right. Okay, so let's move to the next one on the list. We have the preceding sibling. Preceding sibling is the same as following sibling, but following sibling moves downward, preceding sibling moves upward. Preceding siblings talking about two nodes that they are the same level, and they share the same parent. Again, we're talking about these two, right? So this two is exactly at the same level. They are exactly at the same level, and they are what? They have the same parent, right? They have the same parent. All right. So let's say that, as I said, that the preceding sibling moves upward, right? Upward, go back, upward. So I want to identify this first, and then I want to move back to here, which they are on the same level, preceding, following. So let's first identify this. How we can identify? We can say, what was that? Class, right? Class. Did I copy the value? Yes, I copied the value, and then, all right, there are two. So you want to stay on the one on the bottom, then you can open bracket and number 2 close bracket. Now we are at the bottom. So as I said, if I want to move from here to this one, they are the same level and they share the same parent. How can I do that? 2// then preceding dash sibling : and then now we can move div. There you go. We move from here to here. All right, so preceding sibling identify the web elements that comes before before the current node. So this one is the node and it comes before. Whatever node that comes before this one, we can move to that. And also another condition is that preceding sibling, they must be at the same level. They usually the two nodes that they share the same parent, and they also they are the same level. There is a line that shows that they are at the same level. All right. So what else we have on the list? We have child, right? We have child. So let's actually move to the child. So let's say I want to get rid of this because it's probably going to interrupt our work. So let's say that I want to go over here, right? I want to go over here and I have what? I want to identify this element by the using ID. So what I can do, I can say div, then ID, and there you go. So we identify this one, right? And as you can see, this div has a lot of child, right? These are all the child of this div. How we can go to the child? So there are two scenarios. A single slash moves directly. It shows direct child. So let's say if I use single slash, then div, then you see that it moves directly from this to direct child. But what about if I use two forward slash? Two forward slash refers to all the child or all the sub-child. If I use two forward slash and then say div, you see that now I have 14 of children. I mean, the ID as 14 div children. So now, and if we can actually do that either this way, or we can use the child method access, right? Child : and we can use div. So now we have 14 div, and you can use the bracket to select which one you desire, right? Inside the bracket, you can identify number 2. I want to move to number 3. I want to move to number 4, number 5. So in that case, you can actually move to whichever you want to. So if this is the case, you want to move to number 2, but now it's not unique. It's a 1 of 5, right? It says 1 of 5. What you can do in that case, you can enclose, you can surround all of the with the parentheses, closing parentheses at the end, and opening parentheses at the beginning. Now that you did this, now you can open up another bracket, and inside the bracket you can decide which one you want. Number 1, you see that right now it says 1 of 1. If you say 2, still these are all 1 of 1. So this is mean that this is the correct element and you can perform action on it. All right. So we move on from child to parent, right? From child to parent. So let's say that I'm going to get rid of this. All right. So I want to identify this username, right? I want to identify this username. So let's say by the ID, again, by the ID. So what I can do over here, I can say input, then I got the ID, paste the value, and right now I just identified this username by the ID. So I want to know what's the parent of this ID. What's the parent of? I want to move to the parent of the ID. How can I do that? I can say // parent : div, right? So then I successfully move to the parent of this one. So this ID comes from the parent of this ID. So this is the parent. All right. So the next one that we have on the list is descendant, right? We have descendant. So let's say that I wanna, let's say I wanna identify this, right? I wanna identify this by the root node, this element by the root node, by the ID and the value root. If I wanna, I can say that div, then ID equal to, right? So this is the ID, right? This is the ID. And right now, if I want to move to descendant meaning that children or grandchildren, or great grandchildren. You can use by using the descendant. So I can say descendant colon and div. You see that? So now it has 14 descendant. And as I said, if you want to specify one of this descendant, then in that case, you can use the bracket, right? You can use the bracket index to move, to pick which one you want to select from this 14. All right. The last one, we have the ancestor. The ancestor is the last one, right? So let's say, again, I want to identify this username right here. I want to identify this, and I'm going to use the ID, or this time, actually, I'm going to use name. They are the same value, but I'm going to use the name. So let's say input name, and I'm going to paste this. Here you go. So I just identify this. How we can identify the ancestor? You can say 2/ and ancestor colon then div. So now there are 7 ancestor, right? Ancestor refers to the parent or grandparent or great grandparent. And if you want to move all the way to number 7, what you can do, you can surround this with the parentheses and surround this one. Then you can open up your bracket. And so this is number 1 and number 2. You can move to whichever index you want to move, right? Number 5 and number 6 and number 7. So now I'm at the 7. And I think that's it about our list. We cover everything. XPath is very important. They are very effective in automation, and they are predominantly used in automation comparing to CSS selector or other type of the other type of the locators. XPath are very important. So make sure that you pay enough attention, or you master this XPath. You practice on different web pages and try to use these functions because they are very important. All right, so that's it about this video. This is everything that was supposed to be covered in the video. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. All right, thank you.